Hello, this feels a bit odd, a bit alien. It's been a while since we did this. If you're new, I used to make videos a few years ago as a bit of fun, but also to build my confidence in sharing my experience for Rare Disease Day. I made a few videos for that a couple of years ago. I looked at my notifications recently and I found some messages from people from my vasculitis videos, and I realised that I hadn't really shared the end of my story. It's actually been 8 years since my diagnosis of granulomatosis with polyangiitis, and it doesn't really play an active part in my life anymore. When I was first diagnosed, I remember looking for people's stories online, for people's experiences, and at the time in 2012 there didn't seem to be a lot out there. The stuff that was out there was some scary stuff. I think over the past couple of years though, people's stories of living with vasculitis are much more visible and available online. I just know that if I'd heard some of those stories back then, it would have saved quite a few sleepless nights when I was first diagnosed. So I guess for Rare Disease Day, I wanted to share my experience from diagnosis 8 years up until now, and what is life like now 8 years after diagnosis. I know that's something that I would have found useful, so hopefully to someone out there this might be useful for you. So let's take a little time travel back to 2012. We were hosting the Olympics. The Spice Girls reunited for the closing ceremony. Will and Kate had just got married in the last year. We were still debating Team Edward or Team Jacob or Team Bella. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was still in phase 1. Was that around the time of the Avengers? So yeah, only 8 years ago, but a lot has changed. So for me, that's when my symptoms started. In 2012, I was in sixth form, and it was a time when I'd finally decided what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go to university and study English literature, and that was my life goal. So I was busy revising and preparing for exams, working really hard, and that's when I started to notice a few symptoms like really heavy nosebleeds. I got some joint pain in my wrists and my hands. I was fairly tired and I had some rashes on my legs. And being the scientific genius that I am, I just thought, it's probably just down to stress. I was so focused on my exams and doing well that there were some lessons that I had to rush out of with really heavy nosebleeds because I was feeling dizzy, and I was just explaining, I'm just a bit stressed, I think. Then came along results day. I got exactly what I wanted. Me and my best friend got into uni and we went out to party, and it was one of the top 5 best days of my life. And I remember thinking, exams are over, I got the results I want, so surely I'll be less stressed and these symptoms will go away. But on that same night, I woke up to what looked like a murder scene. I just had one of the heaviest nosebleeds I had. And at that point, I still justified it as, I'm probably just a bit stressed about starting uni. If you take anything from this, if you have inconvenient, painful symptoms, don't just accept them as the norm. Please get them checked out. I didn't back then because I thought I was clever enough to see where they were coming from. So at the time I didn't get anything checked out and I just went straight on to uni. My first week of uni, I instantly found my besties and I felt like I'd turned into a massive grown-up because I was out in the big wide world. And naturally, Freshers Week resulted in Freshers Flu. But my Freshers Flu was worse than everyone else's Freshers Flu. What started out as a cold seemed to extend on for a month, and those sort of on and off joint pains I had spread all over my body to the point where it was constant, where I couldn't sleep, and it was just unbearable. And still, at that point, I justified it as, it's probably just extreme Freshers Flu. It made the simple tasks almost impossible. I remember having to get my flatmate to make me a cup of tea. That sounds like a cop-out, but I literally couldn't lift a kettle and flick the button or plug things in the wall. It just really hurt in my arms and in my joint pains. It took me ages to climb the stairs. I was on, I think, like the 3rd floor, and my joints used to swell as well, so I'd have constant hot water bottles and I'd be on a strict routine of paracetamol and ibuprofen. And I remember it got to a point where I was counting down the minutes until I could next have a dose of painkillers, or until I could make another hot water bottle which was hot enough just to take away some of the pain. There were other symptoms happening at the time, like a persistent cough and a bit of pain when I coughed, but the joint pain almost deafened me to everything else because it was a thing that was really bad. And after a time where it stopped me from sleeping so much, I was falling asleep in lectures, and it got to a point where it was just painful to get outside because I knew there were stairs ahead of me, and I just spent a lot of my time in my room. And you're not yourself when you haven't had sleep and when you're under that pain, and you think thoughts that you wouldn't usually have. There's a point which stands out as a moment where I realised I really need to get this checked out, and after missing all these lectures because I was inside so much, I decided to go to the library and catch up on some work. Now my library was like 2 minutes away, I lived on campus, so I packed myself a bag and tried to walk to the library, and I just got out the door and I just started crying because it really hurt to walk. And I remember bumping into one of my course mates, and they were walking the same way, and they must have had a conversation with me, but I couldn't hear anything because I was just trying to count the steps to get there. At which point I was like, I should probably see a doctor. So I saw the doctor at uni, and I suspected I had rheumatoid arthritis because I had to look things up online and I thought it was really scientific and clever. And so I got some tests done for that. They referred me to the hospital where they said, yes, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. And I was like, yes, I know what I'm dealing with now. And so I went home with that, and it made such a difference because even though I still wasn't sleeping, my family were there, and my sister would sometimes just stay up with me when things were really hard, and she couldn't do anything to help. But just having someone there made such a difference, and it just felt so much lighter. A day or two after that diagnosis, I got a call whilst I was in bed watching Edward Scissorhands eating a bowl of soup, and they said, you've actually got something called vasculitis. It was called Wagon's at the time, but they've changed the name to Granulomatosis with Polyangiitis, so GPA as it is now. And they explained that on the phone, but to be honest it was just a bit bizarre, and I didn't believe them because it just sounded really random. And that new diagnosis period of about 2 weeks just is a bit of a blur, to be honest. I don't remember much because it was just a lot of new information. It was really confusing and hard to take on board, which is why I genuinely didn't believe the diagnosis for ages. And that's the time when I started looking for those stories from people or other people's experiences to try and understand it. Within a week the symptoms got quite serious. I started coughing up some blood, and so I was taken to hospital and we ended up at Newcastle. So at the time I looked up the name, alveolar hemorrhage. So that was a bit of bleeding in the lungs. So I spent 2 weeks in hospital. I had a blood transfusion, a plasma exchange, rituximab, and I got my nose cauterized with the nosebleeds, and just lots of medications happening. So it just felt a bit busy, to be honest. So after all these treatments and stuff, we managed to get out of hospital on Christmas Eve at 5 p.m. just in time for a Spice Girls documentary for the flop musical Viva Forever, and that was one of the most magical Christmas moments I've had. It was actually really nice because my brother and my sisters basically had to work together to pull Christmas together and a whole Christmas dinner because me and my parents were over staying in Newcastle, and it just felt really homely and really nice to be with my family. Basically after hospital I realised that getting better was going to take a long time. It was going to take a lot of treatments and going back and forth to hospital, and so I decided to pull out of uni and hopefully restart the next year. So I spent the year at home having those treatments and just monitoring how my body was responding to that, and they worked for me, thankfully. Rituximab worked really well. I know that's one thing I get comments about because I made a video about what that transfusion looks like for people who are maybe unsure. For me it worked well, and we didn't need to go into any other more severe treatments, which was good. But at that time I didn't realise what a confidence knock I'd had. I think it's great to acknowledge when you're getting physically better and that you're responding well to treatments, but I didn't realise how much the diagnosis had affected me mentally, and I felt quite frustrated that what I'd worked hard for, getting into uni, was just suddenly overturned by a vasculitis diagnosis, which I didn't quite understand, and everything just sort of had to go out the window for it. I have made a video about that year and what intercalating from uni because of illness is like. I'll link that below, even though I haven't watched them in a while, so they're probably cringe, but hopefully they're useful. So thankfully I got back to uni in 2013 and I had a great 3 years. I was conscious that things weren't the same, that I didn't have the same energy, and that I still had to go back for treatment and stay up to date on medications and keep an eye on my symptoms. And it was quite tiring, so it was quite hard in that sense because I felt like I had to take it slowly when uni's a time when you can be youthful and energetic. But I think the whole experience just made me more determined to make the most of it and really enjoy it. I felt like I'd gone through so much just to be there and to be well that it gave me some new positivity in a way to make the most of the time where you live with your best friends and you spend your time studying a subject that you've chosen, that you can enjoy. And it's full of many joyful memories, Nerf wars, study sessions, lightsaber battles, and lots of fun parties. And so I'm so happy that I got the opportunity to make those memories again. It It was when I was back at uni in 2014, I think, that I decided to share my vasculitis experience for Rare Disease Day, which led to me making videos, and it snowballed into a weird hobby, which eventually led me to meet some amazing friends through the internet, through YouTube, who have had the opportunity to meet in real life, and they're just as amazing as they are online. So at that time it was good because I began to see how that negative experience triggered some positive ones. So in the summer that I'd finished uni in 2016, I had my last dose of rituximab and was officially in remission, so there was no active vasculitis happening. And I think for a year or two after uni, I had a mindset of my life being defined by pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis. I spent a lot of time looking back before I was diagnosed at the years when I was in like a sixth form and all my friends were together in our hometown, and things were well and I had no symptoms, and I remember thinking, well, that was the best time. Things won't get better than that because I didn't know what vasculitis was then, and so I guess I looked at things quite negatively then. But after uni, when I started working and building the confidence back in myself, I started to build the mindset of not being defined by that diagnosis. And 4 years later, 2020, aka today, I don't feel like I'm looking back all the time. I feel very much in the present, which is a big move from before. I see vasculitis and that whole experience as in my past. It's not visible in my life anymore, like those symptoms I had years ago. So I thought it might be nice to update on what is life like now, and what role does vasculitis play. I know I could have really used hearing that. So I get seen at hospital every 6 months for a checkup. I'm only on one medication long term, ramipril, as one of the lasting side effects of vasculitis is that it's affecting my kidneys and the way it processes wee. But I don't feel that. It's only on my brain when I wake up in the morning and take the medication, and I have one tiny scar from the central line I had for plasma exchange. So that's just the physical part that vasculitis plays in my life now. Not really anything compared to the beginning. So 8 years later, this is the point where I'm at, where I think, yeah, that was a thing that happened a while ago. And every now and then I catch myself doing things that I wouldn't have thought possible years ago, especially in the midst of all the tiredness and the joint pain. I remember one moment, and it was after a week of being diagnosed, and my best friend came home from uni, and we decided to get out the house and go into town for a coffee, and she had to walk me like an old lady, linked on her arm, and we sat having coffee, and I broke down then because I remember just saying how I remember feeling sort of, is this it now? Do I have to get used to these symptoms and just live with them? I'd felt those symptoms and that pain for so long that I just accepted it as the norm and thought, I guess things won't get better, but they're completely not there anymore. I love walking and fell walking, and I have moments where I get to the top of a mountain and I think, my little legs have carried me up here, and that's such an amazing feeling. When I was having lots of treatments and I was on lots of medication, and my immune system was suppressed, I'd heard lots of talks about being careful in the type of work you get involved in, and being careful of certain jobs that are public facing or working with young people, because if you catch a cold or infection, you're at higher risk with this kind of disease. I now have a job that I really enjoy, and it does involve working with young people. Every day is different and requires a different amount of energy, and I managed to keep up, which makes such a difference from the person who needed multiple naps a day just to cope with normal uni life. And I'm glad to say that I now can make a cup of tea on my own. So I live alone now, and I can happily lift the kettle without any pain. It's the little things you got to celebrate. And I don't mean to say I just don't think about vasculitis anymore, because you've still got to be aware of your health and any symptoms that might come up, and I am. But I just want to emphasise how back when I was diagnosed, I couldn't see past that diagnosis, and I couldn't envisage what life would be like. And obviously no one can, but I thought it'd be useful to share what it really is like now, and maybe it provides a bit of support for someone who maybe doesn't know what's happening at the moment, or maybe you're at that same point that I was 8 years ago, where you can't see past your diagnosis and you can't see where it might lead. So that's my full story, I guess. I know this is kind of unstructured, and I'm hoping it makes sense. But yeah, if you've got any messages, comment below. I'm not too active on YouTube anymore, but I do check my notifications. You can follow me on Instagram, where I'm a bit faster at responding. But I'll also link in the description below the Rare Disease Day website and some useful vasculitis resources. So yeah, I'm hoping Rare Disease Day creates some much needed awareness for the different conditions that are out there. I think the important thing is that it's making lots of people's experiences visible so other people can relate to that and feel supported and know where they can get support from as well. Anywho, nice speaking to you, and I will see you on the flip side.